Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Pearlman.
Hello. For the next half hour, we're going to be talking about sustainable program management, corporate social responsibility, environmental, social governance, and climate resilience with my guest, Shay Cunningham. She is founder and principal of Balanced Approach. She is co-founder and co-manager of Sustainable Business Certification Program for the City of Culver City in California, and she has co-founded many other organizations and worked on many projects around the world and has received numerous awards, including her most recent, the Culver City Chamber of Commerce Women Business Leadership Visionary Award. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Nancy. It's a real pleasure to be here.
You are very active in trying to establish public policy that shows sustainable programs and planning, and to try to get offices, retail, restaurants, arts, and school sectors to be more energy efficient, to conserve water, to reduce waste and pollution, to incorporate renewable technologies. Is there one area that's more important than another?
That's a great question. From my perspective, it is all very important. It's all part of the whole. So I'm very much interested in helping sort of with a comprehensive approach. But really at the end of the day, especially now as we are seeing the climate crisis really just move forward, and we're seeing it every day. Just yesterday, by the way, we had extreme precipitation day. Each and every year we have hotter and hotter summers and more extreme weather. So really at the end of the day, we need to reduce our carbon emissions and related pollution. That is sort of at the forefront of what I'm working on right now with businesses, both small local businesses as well as larger businesses and cities, quite frankly, a couple of cities that I'm working with, is to reduce the carbon footprint of their operations.
Culver City is in the western part of Los Angeles County, surrounded by the city of Los Angeles, near Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, Inglewood, and other smaller cities. It is in a position where it can truly be a model. You were very active in getting them to develop sustainable programs so that you had, in the first 3 years of a certification program for sustainability, 46 businesses were certified, annually saving 246,526 kilowatt hours of electricity, 3,300,000 gallons of water. You diverted 38 tons of recyclables from the landfill and avoided an estimated 176 metric tons of greenhouse gases. How did you come up with all those figures, and what percentage of the waste and the electricity was saved?
Yes, well, it is exciting, especially when somebody else talks about it. Makes me excited. Yeah, the 46 businesses that we certified were over this 3-year period. So we're just starting year 4 for the City of Culver City. Unfortunately, we had to put it on pause last year because of the COVID crisis and the related budget cuts, but we are really happy that we're moving forward now with year 4. Now, the figures that you just cited are basically annual savings. So all of these 46 businesses together are saving this on an annual basis, so it's not a one-time basis. We crunch the numbers. We look at utility bills. There is a range of savings that happens with the utility bills, especially electricity. Depends on if we are able to retrofit the offices with all LEDs. Some of them we were able to do a full 100% retrofit. Others, it's not quite full, but in order to be certified, they have to agree before recertification that they will be 100% LED. And then we also are working on on-site solar projects, and a number of our businesses have completed that, as well as it's called the CPA, which is a community choice aggregation, which is basically an option to purchase 100% renewable energy, and that many cities, including Culver City and Los Angeles and many other cities around the state, have this opportunity. So both residents and businesses have the opportunity to purchase 100% renewable. And so this year, that is actually a very important part of what we are encouraging businesses to do, is to go 100% renewable, even if they have on-site solar, which will, at the end of the day, the payoff actually is very beneficial for the businesses. They end up saving money. And as they're able to send the electricity back to the grid, at the end of the year, they receive usually some rebates for that. And in terms of water conservation, again, we work with the utilities, and we've created a really great partnership with Golden State Water in particular. And so for all of the businesses that we work for, we get retrofits for their faucets. We actually, if they don't have high-efficiency toilets, we get those installed. So we just sort of crunch the numbers on that. And then, again, recyclables, in terms of diverting waste from the landfill. Many of the businesses, surprisingly, when we start with them, they don't necessarily have a recycling program in place. Some of them do, but all of them really need a little bit of help. So we get everybody recycling, so we divert waste from the landfill. And, again, we use utility bills to kind of just track that. And then we put that all together, and we look at what the greenhouse gases are with respect to diverting waste from the landfill, with respect to saving electricity and water.
Culver City also has its own unified school district, and you established the Green Ribbon Award-winning sustainability program. What did that entail, and how did the schools change?
Yes, I have to say I was very inspired by my children. That's how I got involved with the school district. You know, I've been a sustainability planner for about 25 years now, and as I was bringing my son into the kindergarten, I was a little bit shocked that there was no recycling going on at the campus. And I think we all know that kids, they're little sponges. So if they learn about the importance of recycling and the importance of energy efficiency and conservation, water conservation, et cetera, early on, it just becomes a habit. And so I just decided, yes, we need to make this happen. So I just found some like-minded people in the community, and we piloted a program at my children's elementary school. They're now in high school, by the way. We ended up working with Cal Recycle and got some money, and then we broadened it out, and I was leading the effort. I raised some money through Cal Recycle, and we started with recycling, and then we started with food waste composting for all the 10 campuses across the district. Then we worked on on-site solar, and then we just went through the whole 9 yards using the Federal Green Ribbon Award criteria for best practices, and worked with, for instance, the students and the sort of passionate staff members who really get the value of being sustainable, and created leadership at those levels. For instance, classroom has a green leader, and then at the high school there's a green team called Green 5 team. The Green 5, by the way, is reusing, reducing, reusing, recycling, riding, like riding your bike, and rethinking, or rethink. We created this eco-literacy program and leadership program. We worked on waste reduction, pollution reduction with the custodians, which basically means we switched to green cleaning products for their health and well-being and the health and well-being of the students and the staff.
What is being taught, eco-literacy? Because when I started in the environmental movement, coordinating the first Earth Day in 1970 in California and working with conservation and environmental organizations back then, the schools didn't want us in the classroom talking about how they can conserve, how they can be better in terms of environmental practices. They wanted the agencies and the companies who had the glossy literature and were doing greenwashing and saying they cared but really weren't. I would hope that has changed now.
Yeah, sadly, it's still a little bit of a challenge, and partly because, which I understand, with the teachers, they have already a lot on their plate. They have a curriculum that they have to teach, and so certainly in the beginning, it was just seen as, oh, we don't have the time. We can't add this to the day. But we were able to get enough interest from enough teachers, from the administration, from a lot of passionate students, by the way, at all levels, elementary, middle, and high school. This is important, and we need to at least pilot this. So, and we created the Green 5 program. And also, in addition, the California EPA has created this science-based curriculum that is actually a replacement curriculum. So rather than an add-on, it can be used in place of the science lessons, some of the science lessons that they are giving at all different grade levels. So that definitely is helpful. The particular curriculum is beautifully illustrated by the National Geographic society, and that also is helpful. So again, it's not like perfect. We're not in a perfect situation yet, but I think progress is certainly being made. And I think more and more people are realizing in the school world that eco-literacy is incredibly important, and we need to address these issues that we're all facing right now with climate change.
And in higher education, things have changed. When I coordinated Earth Day out of UCLA, when I was getting my BA in anthropology, there was no environmental studies program. We advocated for it, and you seem to be a recipient of it. I got my master's in urban studies and planning from Antioch University. You got your master's in urban and regional planning from the UCLA School of Public Policy, and a professional certification in global sustainability, and you're a lead green associate. What is a lead green associate?
Good question. Yes, I love that we have this very similar backgrounds, Nancy. And thank you, by the way, for being a leader and for paving the way for me and others to follow in your footsteps. So the lead green associate, that's sort of the base level of the leadership in energy and environmental design, which is through the USGBC, the Green Building Council. It is focused on buildings. Depends on how you slice it and dice it, but buildings can account for up to 40% of greenhouse gas emissions in the built building, as well as the building envelope, as well as operations. So while I was really sort of knee-deep in the school world working with the Culver City Unified program, the sustainability program, I was also working with other schools across the state to tap into a program called Prop 39, which has sunsetted by now, but it was money that was set aside for energy efficiency for public schools in California, and it was fantastic. So it was free money for the schools to do their LED lighting retrofits and water conservation. In that process, I decided it would make sense for me to make sure that I am fully aware of best practices in the green building world, and so I went ahead and did my studying and took the exam for the Lead Green Associate. And I'm actually looking into adding on to that and becoming WELL certified, which is also an offshoot of the USGBC, and it focuses on the well-being of the building occupants. There's different levels of the LEED program.
Another aspect of environmental awareness, protection, is preserving our unique wild areas, natural habitats, and you have been active as a member of the Advisory Council for Ballona Creek Renaissance. And Ballona Creek goes into the Ballona wetlands, one of the few wetlands estuaries left along the Southern California coastline near LAX. It's constantly being threatened with more development to destroy the wetlands. The creek has been channelized. Is there any plan to renovate it and get it back into a more natural state?
Yes, the Ballona Creek is near and dear to my heart. I live just a couple of blocks from it. Before I moved into the City of Culver City, I actually lived right where the Ballona Creek opened up to the world in Mid-City. It was sort of like that was actually one of the selling points to move to that area. And I worked with a number of other passionate neighbors, and I became the chair of the Mid-City Neighborhood Council's Ballona Creek Greening project. So that's kind of where I started with it. And I was working with people who've been working on this area for quite some time, including the Ballona Creek Renaissance organization. So that's how I became connected to Jim Lamb, who's the founder and former president. There are plans. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of organizations that are working together. I think there's a lot of good energy there, but there hasn't been a whole lot of movement yet in terms of doing what has been done, at least in some parts on the LA River, which is creating some soft bottom, some permeable bottom spaces. So, kind of renaturalizing parts of it. And I do believe it's going to happen. It's just taking a long time. Another aspect of it is really bringing people to it. So I know there are some plans through the City of Culver City to naturalize some of the spots, as well as make it more of a kind of community focal point. That is an opportunity to kind of raise awareness about the creek, about the habitat, and create more kind of environmental stewardship of the creek.
We're going to talk more about sustainability programs and plans and actions with my guest, Shay Cunningham, when we return in a moment.
Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman continues with further discussion of the world's critical ecological issues. For more information, you may call 310-559-9160 or go to www.ecoprojects.org. Now, here's Nancy.
I'm speaking with Shay Cunningham. She is founder and principal of Balanced Approach, also co-founder and co-manager of Sustainable Business Certification Program for the City of Culver City, California, and is a sustainability consultant for ASGN. What is ASGN, and how are you getting businesses to incorporate more ecological principles, policies, and plans?
ASGN is a publicly traded company. It is basically an IT and staffing firm, and their main clients are Microsoft and Google and Amazon and Apple and other large corporations. And they are mostly in North America, but they also have offices in Europe. I've been working with them for a little over a year now. It's been fantastic working with them because they came to me saying, look, we know that corporate sustainability is very important. We don't really know anything about it. Help us move forward and be more sort of in the top tier with our peers in terms of doing the right thing.
What were they most reluctant to do, and what did they find easiest to do and were very desirous of doing?
It's been such a pleasure working with this company because they are very open to making major changes. They had their first environmental social governance report, which is sort of one of the newer terms, ESG, in 2019. It was pretty light, and so they asked me to really kind of like step it up. I basically gave them about 24 recommendations in terms of new policies and sort of corporate responsible business policies like human rights policy, zero anti-corruption policy, and anti-discrimination policy, these sorts of things, as well as an environmental policy, environmental management policy, and then also DEI, which is diversity, equity, inclusion. They started that program and actually had hired their first DEI director in 2020, basically moving that direction a little bit more deeper and across the entire corporation rather than just in one segment of the corporation. They're fully on board with increasing diversity amongst senior executives, as well as, in terms of ethnicity and gender, sexual orientation, physical abilities, age, etc. And they are also stepping up the supplier diversity aspect as well. And then also in terms of giving back to the community, we are working on setting up right now a charitable sort of corporate philanthropy program, which is going to engage the employees so they can kind of pick out what they want to give back to, what types of organizations they want to give back to. So it's not just about the environment, it's also about the social dimension, both internally as well as community-wide.
You have been involved in environmental protection both locally and internationally. There's so many different areas. If we can just touch quickly and briefly on some of them, you have led the Climate Vulnerability Assessment and Resilience Plan, focused on the wildland-urban interface communities of the Santa Monica Mountains for the Malibu Foundation. You've provided an oversight on a climate action communications plan for the city of Iowa, I assume in Iowa, not California. You have been a former board member of the Office of Community Beautification in the city of Los Angeles. You've worked with the United Nations Global Compact. You have led Environmental Innovations Project for the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris, France. You have worked in Thailand and actually many years ago wrote books about the Siamese tragedy, development and disintegration in modern Thailand, the Dark Victory, the United States Structural Adjustment and Global Poverty. Local, international, they all are confronting the same issues, aren't they?
Absolutely, yes. I do feel that it is extremely important to be working at all levels. So it's not just about the government making policies. It's not just about corporations stepping up and moving forward with their corporate, social, and environmental responsibilities. It's also just residents and small businesses. We got to hit it at all angles. The clock is ticking. We really need to double down on our carbon emission reductions, our pollution reductions. We still have a lot to do, but I feel like we're making some traction.
So when you co-founded Focus on the Global South in Bangkok, Thailand, what were you trying to achieve there?
That was a fantastic opportunity for me. I am so happy I was able to do that, which is kind of funny because I was working for the Institute for Food and Development Policy in San Francisco, straight out of college, my undergrad, and I was working with a director. He asked me to co-found with him the Focus on the Global South in Bangkok, which is now an international organization based in Bangkok. It's focused on the Asia-Pacific region. It's based out of Chulalongkorn University, so it's sort of a university-based think tank, but it's an education for action organization, very much focused on looking at the sort of economic well-being of the region, of its residents, as well as the environmental impacts of like trade and development, and producing alternatives that are more sustainable, both in terms of people as well as obviously the environment.
When you are working internationally, do you find that other countries or groups are doing innovations that we as Americans could adopt, or are you trying to introduce some of our programs, plans, actions, technologies to other areas of the world? And what are those innovations in terms of environmental sustainability?
We really have moved to a more global society where we are really able to share best practices globally. Years ago when I was in Thailand, it was looking at a lot of the problems, actually, of export-oriented trade and those impacts on local communities, and sort of spotlighting that issue and spotlighting not just what's going on in the United States, because there's there's still a lot of export-oriented growth happening around the world, really. Just sort of to bring in best practices from different countries. And in terms of my time at the OECD in Paris, and we were looking at different social environmental innovations that are going on across Europe, sort of micro projects like microclimate action projects. But there are so many smart, well-intentioned people all over the world. And so the idea is to support those people who are really being very creative about solutions to our environmental problems.
When I did my first Emmy-nominated documentary on the Santa Monica Mountains and Rim of the Valley corridor back in the mid-'80s, we documented some of the new state parks, the new Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area, city parks, so forth. And yet the Santa Monica Mountains continue to have projects planned for them instead of setting aside more habitat. The parks, even Griffith Park in the downtown Los Angeles, is constantly having proposals for developments that are not appropriate for natural areas. What do you see as the plan to protect these wildlands that are so close to millions of people?
Thank you again for the work that you've done in the area, because it's hugely important to build upon the base of progress. In terms of the Santa Monica Mountains, I mean, it really is a wildland-urban interface area. We have a fair amount of people living in there. About 108,000 people live in basically 8 communities. So we're talking about Malibu, the city of Malibu, the unincorporated Santa Monica Mountains area, Banga Canyon, as well as the Pacific Palisades, and then Las Virgenes communities of Agora, Calabasas, Hidden Hills, unincorporated LA County area as well. It's a region, and oftentimes cities work in silos and don't really, cross-pollinate with their neighbors. So this project that I'm working on now is a regional project, because what these communities all have in common is they are in the wildland-urban interface region that is very susceptible to drought and to fires in particular, as well as extreme precipitation, which then can create mudslides and landslides. Also, the coast extremely vulnerable to sea level rise, storm surges, and as you know, the world-renowned PCH, Pacific Coast Highway, is right there, with many houses that are just right there on the edge of the water, and the water is continuing to encroach upon the houses and the highway, and which is very, very dangerous in terms of when there is a fire event. evacuating people out of there. So what we're doing is we're doing an inventory of the community assets. We're looking at the different hazards and projecting what we're going to look at in terms of if emissions are not reduced, as well as if emissions are reduced at mid-century and at the end of the century. And then we're also looking at the social vulnerabilities. This area also has a high percentage of older adults, people who are over the age of 65, much higher than the rest of LA County and many other cities. They're more at risk, as well as day laborers. There's a lot of day laborers that commute in from South Los Angeles to the region, and they are especially vulnerable because they're working mostly outside, or many of them are working outside. There's also domestic workers working inside, but they are reliant upon public transportation, so it puts them more at risk. We are looking at best practices in sustainability in terms of things like agriculture that is more beyond resilient. It's regenerative, water reclamation and recycling. We're looking at home hardening, which is making the homes more resilient to fire. We're looking at native plantings.
There are so many ways that individuals, companies, businesses, educational institutions, governments can be more sustainable, more socially responsible, deal with some of the ecological crises that we have to tackle. Is there a master list? I would assume it would take many, many pages.
Yes. Well, thankfully, there are a couple of sort of best practices to follow for corporations and smaller businesses. The big one, the overarching one, is the United Nations Global Goals for Sustainable Development, or Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, which includes poverty reduction, hunger reduction, health and well-being, affordable and clean energy, clean water and sanitation, reducing inequities, creating, climate action. Some of them are actually overlap. Those are sort of the overarching goals. And then we have reporting frameworks that help guide corporate social responsibility, environmental responsibility programs. So that includes the Global Reporting Initiative, MSCI, and SASB. Those are three main reporting initiatives, as well as one more, the Carbon Disclosure Project, or CDP.
There are certainly practices that everyone and every institution and agency can adopt: reducing waste, looking to conserve energy, getting rid of toxic pollutants in their cleaning products and their other operations. But each industry also has unique aspects that have to be addressed more specifically. You've worked with the fashion industry to get apparel to be provided in a more ecological manner. Restaurants need to go to local and organic foods. We need more organic materials in our products. Could you describe some of the specific concerns of different businesses and how they can be more sustainable and what they need to do?
Well, I'm currently working on the more local level with restaurants, retail establishments, office buildings, schools, art galleries, and theater establishments. They all have in common, really, they all use energy, they all have waste on site, they all have cleaning products and whatnot. So just working with them on all of those aspects of waste reduction, pollution reduction, energy conservation, water conservation. But it's really the manufacturing companies that have the bigger lift, which is, to create more of a life cycle environmental sort of responsibility to their actual products.
While individuals can take direct action, businesses can take direct action. Do we need more laws? Do we need our legislatures to demand and mandate more ecological practices?
Absolutely. Yes, we do. There is a lot of upgrading that we need to do on all levels, including, starting at the real base level of reducing disposable packaging, disposable plastics, as well as carbon emission reduction. I was happy to hear that Governor Gavin Newsom in California committed the state to no more fossil fuel cars after 2040, which I think is a little far into the future. I know it is. But then I heard that we discovered that the governor in Washington, the state of Washington, moved the bar up to 2030. So, all cars need to be electric in 2030 in Washington. So I'm pretty sure we're going to meet that challenge as well in California. But those are the sort of things that need to happen. We need to go beyond these big sort of, okay, let's do carbon reduction, go carbon neutral in 2045. Well, we can't wait that long. We need to move it up to 2030 at the very latest in terms of setting these bold goals, and they are achievable. The technology is there. They are achievable.
There are so many issues that we have to look at, and I want to thank you so very much for your work in making our society more sustainable and ecologically sound. Thank you very much for being my guest.
It was really my great pleasure. Thank you so much, Nancy, for having me.
I have been speaking with Shay Cunningham, who is founder and principal of Balanced Approach and co-founder and co-manager of the Sustainable Business Certification Program for the City of Culver City in California, as well as being a sustainability consultant for many companies. I'm Nancy Pearlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Pearlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.